Hey everybody, this is JP Hunt with InkSoft, and this is another episode of the Sell More Merch podcast. Today I'm joined by Ted Church of Anthem Branding, and this is the last time I'll say it, Ted, but I've been a long admirer of what you folks have done at Anthem, and I'm super thrilled to have you guys on the podcast today. So welcome.
Hey, I appreciate it. Thanks for having me. It's good to connect.
All right, great. Well, I'm going to start firing away with some questions here. But before we get really underway with the heavy questions, you give us a little background. Tell us sort of your Reader's Digest, how you got into industry, sort of the origin story, if you would.
Yeah, sounds good. I got into the game, so to speak, when I was 19 years old at the University of Colorado here in Boulder. Came out for school and kind of recognized that they just didn't have a lot of cool merchandise on campus. And I had an uncle in the business in Oregon who was a former professional baseball player and coach at Oregon and in baseball. And then he got into the equipment game. And so I had reached out to him and started making t-shirts and lacrosse shorts. And funny story, I at the time, lacrosse shorts were just kind of a popular item around campus. So I took the route of, trying to make beer money and spending money for school. And I went around to all the different fraternities and sororities and designed a lacrosse short in their color scheme and replaced the interlocking CU out of the Buffalo logo. And I put fraternity and sorority letters in there with their logo. And I would recruit one person to say, hey, if you could sell 20 pairs, I'll give you a free pair. I had my uncle produce them and, made a couple grand and had some spending money and then kind of got into doing game day t-shirts and then partnered up with a guy who had a company kind of already established. And we ran a business together for 13 years and then, kind of more on the apparel, t-shirts, sweatshirts, that sort of thing. And then some promotional items and more transactional. And then realized I wanted to create more of an agency feel and approach and a more thoughtful approach to promotional products and apparel and the way that companies engage with those and started Anthem 14 years ago at this point. With a partner and we've been growing it ever since. So that's kind of the short story of the journey.
Awesome. Love it. So speaking of Anthem branding, for some of our listeners, this might be the first time they've heard of your organization, but I'm going to encourage them and put in the show notes links to your social spaces where they can, really get an informed perspective on, the things that you folks have done. So give us kind of the download on Anthem branding. Like, how do you present yourself to new prospective customers? What is your philosophy and take on, promotional products?
Sure. So Anthem branding, we are a tactile design and merchandise agency, and we really believe in crafting tangible connections between a consumer and, today's most forward-thinking brands and companies. And the approach we take is we really want to amplify our clients' unique ethos, designing with, whether it's equal parts beauty and strategy and really dialing into curating apparel and branded products that would connect authentically with consumers that they're trying to talk to. So really understanding what makes a client and a company unique and then creating solutions and strategies in the tactile items we produce, whether it's packaging and design from that perspective or the actual promotional products and apparel. We really believe in the power of, not only what a brand looks like, but what it feels like when you engage with it. So that's really the approach we take.
That's awesome. And you mentioned it once. And again, as I first learned about you and Anthem branding, I kept hearing this notion of sort of the agency model, the agency perspective. So can you give a little color into what that means, just to make sure?
Yeah, I think what that means for us is less transactional of just slapping a logo on a product and fulfilling a need, but really diving deep and partnering with our clients and understanding what are they trying to achieve, who's their target audience, what do they have a strategy on how they're trying to, align their messaging and their marketing and with how they're trying to engage with their end user in a really authentic way, and really trying to understand what that looks like, and helping them with some of that strategy, and then obviously the execution. So for us, we bring, a strategy team, we bring account management who are kind of managing the day-to-day needs, and then we have our design team, and then we finally also have our production and our team, our sourcing team that goes out and actually makes it happen. So it takes sort of that team approach to deliver on the promise.
Right. Awesome. Okay. Thanks for that
Yeah.
clarity. Now, I'd be remiss if I didn't ask, although I kind of cringe thinking this is going to date our podcast, but we're obviously in the midst of a global pandemic known as COVID. So it's been very interesting to see how entrepreneurs and thought leaders in our space have pivoted and reacted and leveraged, new opportunities. So what's been your experience at Anthem Branding? How have you folks, responded and supported your customers through COVID?
Yeah, it's interesting. Obviously, it's affected all of us, and we're working remotely, and since the very beginning of it in early March, it's interesting. We have thousands of clients in all industries. So some industries are still very busy, and others are obviously really reeling and hurting from the effects of the pandemic. Travel being one of them. Obviously, of anyone doing big, large events, those are all on pause. We've tried to do our best to just support our existing clients and with the business that they do have. Obviously, it seems like everybody took a pause the first month or two of this to try to figure out what was happening and to create some strategies around it. We also pivoted and were able to leverage our supply chain to bring in PPE from our sources in Asia. So that kept us incredibly busy for 2 to 2.5 months, 14-hour days, really helping with a lot of the emergency operations in sort of the state. We're in Colorado, so we worked with a lot of the state agencies to help them. So that helped us in the short term, and provided a nice service for our sort of community in need. That was, while it was great, it's very stressful to be managing all of that and bringing things in with the rules changing with CDC guidelines and FDA and all those things. But we were able to, we have a good network of partners that could help us navigate all that. So that was good. And then it seems like now, as everybody's sort of settled into this new normal, so to speak, people are starting to, we're all obviously, everybody's pretty adaptive and trying to make plans moving forward. So we're seeing a lot of our clients are moving to virtual events, and we're sending out kits to, people's homes so they can participate in these virtual conferences and feel like they're still, maintaining a sense of community. So that's been interesting. And then we have a lot of clients still making plans for moving forward and trying to continue with their, augmented marketing plans, but still, keep momentum going.
Awesome. Great insights. So turning attention back to Anthem Branding, I'm curious, we talked about this agency model, and you have this team that you rally to kind of support the marketing needs and the goals that your prospective customers have. Kind of guide us through the process of what it looks like when you engage in a new project. Like, take us through what sort of steps and milestones look like.
Yeah, I mean, from a high level perspective, it's sort of a 3-part strategy. There's the design, the strategic part of it, and then the account management. There's a sort of design, and there's sort of discover, design, and deliver. So in the discovery phase, it's working with our client to really get and our strategy team to really kind of deep dive into understanding what their messaging is, their strategy, the landscape, how we're going to sort of authentically engage with their end user. And then our account management team kind of steps into really managing budgets and timelines and ideas that will sort of fit within all of those constraints. And then from a delivery standpoint, it's our design team finishing all of the appropriate artwork and working with our production and our sourcing team if we're going offshore to make something or we're doing something domestically to make sure it's exactly how we designed it and get it all delivered on time and, sort of on budget, and making sure that we thread the needle on all those hoops you have to jump through and with all the moving parts. So that's kind of it at a high level. But really it starts with understanding and discovering what the client's real needs are and really kind of diving deep with them to uncover, what the messaging they're trying to achieve and how we're going to, get their client or their end user or their team really excited about what the item is, and making sure we hit on all those touch points of their messaging and their sort of ethos of the brand, as I mentioned earlier, rather than just giving them a sort of catalog of here's some things we could put your logo on, you pick, like really using our expertise and our team to be a guide for them and use our sort of professional experience to guide them through that process.
That's awesome. It's certainly a great way to differentiate.
Yeah, I think, the other thing is it is a team effort. I think for us, there's not a one point of contact that controls everything. It's working with our strategy team, working with our design team, working with our operations and production sourcing team to make sure everybody's aligned to deliver on what we say we're going to be able to do.
Right.
So it takes that team approach. Got it.
Now, sort of curious your view on acquiring new customers. I mean, is there a specific, way that you're investing in lead gen, or is it through referrals? I mean, what's your general view on just bringing in, sort of targeted customers that make sense for Anthem?
Yeah, certainly we've over the years built our business and our reputation on repeat and referral business. We've always believed at the very core, you have to do a really nice job and have a great relationship with a client and come through for them. And that will lead to additional opportunities in business and partnership with that client. Obviously that's not enough in this day and age if you do want to continue to grow your business. So we've focused on really writing good content and delivering useful information to whether they're going to become a client or not, of just people that are looking for additional insights. So our content does lead to additional opportunities and inbound opportunities. And then obviously we've got to then make sure that those clients align with, working with us where it's going to be a good fit and we're going to work well together. I think part of that comes with writing good content to attract that right type of client. And obviously, and then you've got to, we make sure that our website is, all up to speed with, and we're actually in the process of an updated, redesign of our site. But, showcasing good case studies and the work. And, we find that specifically with our work, that when people get an opportunity to check out our site and see our work, it speaks to them, and it does show that we're doing something different than what they've seen from other people, maybe in the standard promotional product, apparel site type of thing. Sorry about that.
Right.
With all these inbound, I thought I'd turn my notifications off. So that, I think there's always more that can be done on that front, which makes that a never-ending process between, showcasing your work on YouTube and all the social channels. And we've got an internal marketing team that helps with that as well. So that's a big piece of it, and that takes a ton of work, and you don't always see the immediate result on that. So I think that can be challenging for some people in the industry, for sure.
Yeah, a little bit of a long tail.
Yeah.
So you mentioned, repeat business, building these relationships. I know some people would argue that you might not even be profitable until maybe your second order. So as it relates to repeat, business and building those relationships, how are you folks staying engaged and staying in front of your customers with ideas? I mean, what does that process look like?
I think part of that is the agency approach, right? We take an account management approach. So we have 6 or 8 account managers who manage they have their specific client sort of on their roster, so to speak, that they're in charge of taking care of their every need and being in touch with them. So it's a pretty proactive approach we take. Rather than waiting for a client to reach out, we're engaging with them. We're aware of what their company's doing because we're following them on social channels and on LinkedIn, and we're reading about them and what they're doing in the news, and we're thinking of items that might work for them, and we know what their schedule of events looks like for the year. So we're always finding reasons to be in touch with them and to show that we're paying attention to what their brand's doing and how we can potentially help them. So it is that constant outreach. And then, obviously we've got newsletters we send out and a mailing list, and we've got content that we send and share and engage our existing clients with, but really it's that finding reasons to be in touch with them is really helpful, and sharing projects we're doing maybe for other industries or other people, just to say, hey, we thought you might find this interesting, and then paying attention to strategically, like, what are they doing for the year? How can we help them achieve their goals? And sort of doing reviews with them and being more than that, being more of that partner than that sort of transactional, like waiting for an order.
Jackpot. Yeah. Smart.
Yeah.
Now, I think it was the first time I heard your name and heard your business was in a podcast, and you spent a lot of time talking. I thought it was fascinating. You spent a lot of time talking about the way you look at a customer, right? And you're quick to say no, and you're quick to say, sorry, the budget's not right. And you just mentioned that a mutual fit. So kind of what's your view on identifying the wrong opportunity and saying no? And just how do you look at sizing up an opportunity in general?
Sure. I think there's a lot of things to look at. Part of it is, clearly does the person that you're dealing with, do they understand what they're trying to achieve? Do they understand, do they have the budget? Do they understand the deadline? Do they understand, I think if they have a knowledge of what they're trying to achieve, that's helpful. If they don't really know and they're just sort of shopping around or trying to figure it out, that might be an opportunity to sort of guide them down the path, so to speak. But really, it's sort of understanding what industry they're in, what their desire is. Is it something that's in our wheelhouse we know we could execute really well, versus chasing our tail because the item doesn't exist or their budget is not realistic. And a lot of times it's just educating a client and having a real conversation about what they're trying to achieve and are they the decision maker? Because sometimes they may be just trying to gather information, but they're ultimately not the decision maker. So I think you have to kind of dive deeper into that and have a real conversation, not just engage over email sort of thing. And then it's looking at, does this align? Are there future opportunities to grow this client into a partner where there's some long-term value of working together? Or is this a one-off that could require a lot of resources away from other things we may need to focus on? So is there an alignment and a fit there? Do they have the budget? Can we really, would this be something we'd be proud of and we could, promote on our social? Does it align with what we're trying to achieve as a business? All those sort of those items come into play. And sometimes it turns out to be a great fit, and other times it's just not the right fit. And what we try to always do if it's not the right fit is just steer them to a solution that we would recommend, so they feel good about just engaging with us at all. Like, oh, that was really, all the time we'll turn people on to other friendly competitors or other sort of people that we just know about that maybe it would just be a better fit for that company. And then that leaves that person with a good taste in their mouth. And then maybe they come back to us for something else.
That's great.
Yeah. But ultimately we try to, again, in all of our content and what we're putting out there, sort of think about it through a lens of finding the right ideal client for us, or the ideal customer profile.
Got it. Well, now I'm going to try to ask a question to get sort of at the secret sauce here. So, as you look at the sales and marketing tools at your disposal, when you're engaging with a new prospective customer, I mean, what is in your mind, the tool that's going to help, push that client over the edge to commit to you folks, and let's assume that you might even be the most expensive, and, in your view, what is that sales tool that you're most proud of, or you think is the most effective at compelling a customer to go with you folks?
I don't know if you're asking more about the platform tools you use in sales, but I think ultimately it's about, at a high level, it's communicating, here's what we're going to do for you. Here's how we're going to execute it. Here's how the budget, what the budget's going to look like. And here's the timeline, and following through and doing what you say you're going to do at every touch point, and making sure that at every engagement, whether it's our strategy team or one of our designers or our production person is talking to the client, that it's very consistent and it's very professional, and it's giving them the information before they know they need it. So there's that, and those organizational tools, we use, if internally we're on Slack a lot, we're obviously G Suite emailing and doing lots of things on, with Sheets and G Suite, engaging with a client. And then on the back end, we've got, we use a different we use Workamajig to manage our platform of just our business. It does all of our accounting functionality, and it does our tasks management and our project management, keeps it all in one place. But that's more internally how we're managing all of our, 600 active projects at any given moment. And all of those, the teams that are involved with that and the tasks that are associated with that, and which member of the team. But I think there are a lot of tools you can use. I mean, a lot of people, we don't do Basecamp, but a lot of people like Basecamp if they're engaging with a longer term project with clients. But really for us, it's all about communication. Then internally, we use a lot of different tools to manage our process, but we try to make it really seamless and easy from a client's perspective, and not get bogged down into our process with them.
Yeah, totally.
But I think what's important for anybody that's managing a lot of projects behind the scenes is you've got to be hyper organized, and everything, it's got to be pretty process driven. You can't fly by the seat of your pants every project. You've got to have your process dialed to keep all those balls in the air, because as you know, even with a basic t-shirt or any project for that matter, there's 50 moving parts that you've got to get right to execute.
Totally. And so in that process, let me ask you, so maybe a bit more of a clarifying
Sure.
question, maybe a little deeper. So if you look at that process, you take a new customer through to discover their needs and really bring light and get agreement, this is the goal, the marketing objective. And that obviously empowers you folks to get creative and bring design and product together to align to those goals. So I guess at the presentation stage, as you go back to a customer and say, here's our big ideas to execute on your goals, is that the sort of sales and marketing tool that is driving that conversion, that gets people super amped and excited, because it just brings that visual layer to taking it to the sort of taking their goals to market, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think that certainly shows we understand what they're trying to achieve. But I think we'll present a deck, that we'll put together in InDesign and present it as a PDF of our vision, our process, our team, how we do what we do, and with some case studies. And that gets someone really excited after they've obviously discovered us on the website and they've had their first point of contact with one of us to kind of talk about their project. We may then send them that deck of here's what Anthem's all about. Here's our process. Here's some case studies. Next step is that discovery phase where we have that conversation, and then we present our deck of here's everything we talked about. Here's sort of what the competitive landscape looks like. Here's how we're going to differentiate you in the white space, and here's how we're going to execute on this particular project with a proposal and a budget. And I think that neatly ties up in a nice bow of, okay, they get it from the 360 degrees from start to finish. They see the vision. They're showing us the competitive landscape and how they're going to execute. And then we go do the work. So that's part of it. And it's at every touch point, it's that consistency. So it's from the first time they see the site to they talk to one of us, to they get that first proposal, to the first round of design, to maybe the revision, to then executing on the deliverable.
Nice.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, given you've been now in the space for a long time, you've probably learned a few things along your journey here. So what's some, business advice that you would relay to a fellow entrepreneur in the space from your experience?
I think one of the biggest lesson is obviously relationships are key. We, every industry's small, so you take a long time to build your reputation, and you can lose it pretty quickly. So, we look at every touch point is key, and trying to be very consistent with that. I think the other thing, like from a customer service standpoint, and being, constantly following through, and the compound effect of like how you do the little things is how you do anything. And you got to consistently work on those little things to get those bigger results. And so, from a relationship standpoint, I've been doing this almost 30 years, which is hard to believe, but people continue to come back, and we still get a ton of referral business, and we'll have a conversation one time with someone 10 years goes by and they come back with a nice sized project. And it shows the power of the relationships. I think humanizing is really key. I think too often, people get into, they get very busy and they just kind of want to instantly react and reply and like move on, and they lose that human touch. So I think that staying human with your partners and your clients is key, and building those rapports. Ultimately, it's all about the relationship. And then, that's from a customer service standpoint. And then I think the other piece that we're just constantly learning and trying to educate ourselves and evolve. So we're never you can't rest on your laurels, and the way you used to do things 5 years ago is irrelevant now. That's definitely something that we've realized is you've got to keep evolving, and staying up on trends. And if you're dealing with your staff, what are the important issues for them, and how do you keep them engaged and involved, and understanding being as transparent as you can with what's happening, and how you're working together as a team. So it's just a constant evolution. I think that's the only constant that I've realized is you've got to continually evolve every aspect of the business, or you'll get left behind.
Totally. Yeah. It seems like COVID sort of really highlighted and accelerated, how folks really need to focus on technologies and, fix deficiencies in their business that may have been nagging for a while.
Yeah. My business partner, Pete Burhoff, and I talk about that all the time, especially with COVID. We 2 years ago moved everything to the cloud, versus having an on-site server backup. We had everything to the cloud, and we pivoted everything to G Suite, and all of our, CRM and all of our sort of back end of how we run this business is on the cloud. And that made this, it's funny, about 10 years ago, we had there was a fire scare in the foothills here in Boulder, and we had to evacuate our office. And we were like 19 people at the time, and we were able to get everything out of the office, all the computers, over to my house in about 20 minutes. But we realized it wasn't all available to be backed up on the cloud and just seamless. And so that was kind of an interesting take. But we say that all the time, like, thank God we did that when we did, because with COVID hitting, we can't imagine if we were trying to get into VPNs into the office server, and it just made it pretty seamless. And then you kind of realize, with all the technology, with Zoom and Slack, you're able to keep things rolling pretty smoothly. Obviously, you miss the sort of organic engagement that happens with the team, and sort of that creative juice and sort of the vibe of the office with cranking tunes and people laughing and sharing, funny stories and that sort of thing. But hopefully we'll get back to that at some point. But we try to replicate that as much as possible on Zoom and those sorts of things. It's hard though.
It definitely is. And I expect that, let's assume 2 to 5 years from now, it seems like a lot of employees love this notion of working from home and sort of that flexibility, but I can just see huge demand as a lot of companies shut down their office space altogether and go virtual and remote. Like Nationwide, insurance shut down 5 major locations, call centers, you name it. I just see, there'll be a big demand for we demand workspace and we want camaraderie. So it's going to be an interesting sort of cultural anthropology to see how that plays out.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, I think people, it was a nice pause. I think everybody's running at such a high pace. It was a nice forced pause to kind of get some priorities in line of what you want out of your life. But I think people realize it is pretty challenging to work at home. I personally like my home to sort of be my sanctuary and hang. And I didn't love having to put an office in my bedroom last minute and deal with that. But unfortunately, I live a few minutes from my office, so I was able to just come back and kind of work out of the office. But yeah, I think people are going to miss that camaraderie but I think it'll come with flexibility. I think people will realize you can almost have the best of both worlds, or you don't have to be at your desk all the time, but it could be available to come in, and you maybe not need as much space, and the office layouts will certainly be different. But yeah, it'll be interesting.
So, I asked you for some of the business advice that you would relay. I think here's another interesting way to get some perspective on the way you see things. When you look at your competitors, and I know you guys compete at a different level, the agency model is much different than the slap a logo on a traditional promotional product distributor. But, what's the things you look at when you look at, competitors that you cringe at, like the mistakes they're making that just drive you crazy? I mean, if you were to consult them, what's some of the things that you would point out that nag at you?
I think I think people that aren't paying attention they're just defaulting to the easy solution, I think can be a problem and a mistake. And on one hand, I understand it because you want to be efficient and you want to make it easy because you're juggling a lot. But I do think you miss an opportunity when you're not, when you're forced. Some people, when you're forced to think outside of the box for a solution, they tend to get paralyzed. Other people get really excited. And I think one of the challenges we face with that is you don't always want to come with an out of the box solution because it is a lot of work and a lot of inefficiencies. And we talk about here all the time, sometimes you have to just be effective before you can be efficient. But every time that we're forced to think creatively or come up with a solution that maybe isn't obvious or it's challenging, typically that leads to an opportunity or an item or something that we now can then offer other clients and then get more efficient. And it becomes a really cool project that we can hang our hat on and showcase and make a decent margin on and just get excited about and be different than everybody else. So I think that's a common mistake I see, is just that default, not really trying, not putting a lot of effort into the presentation or the thoughtful approach. And just kind of getting rote and, going sort of automatic pilot. I think that's a kind of and, obviously we don't spend a ton of time. One of the things I really like about what we do is, it's not just transacting a product. I mean, it's really trying to understand what's unique for this specific client. And there's overlap, obviously, in solutions we can offer that would work for a lot of different people. But we do love that fact that it can be custom and creative for each individual client. And so you can get out of that sort of automatic pilot of here's the same old thing. I think in our world, nothing's worse than when a client's like, yeah, I've reached out to 4 or 5 companies and everybody gave me the same items.
Sure.
And I think that's one of the challenges with this industry is, everybody's kind of, if you're in the traditional supply chain, you're just going to the same suppliers, and it's just a matter of who's curating what. And
exactly.
Well, we have access to all that, and sometimes you have to turn something in 3 days to a week and your options are limited, you've got to go to that route. That's fine. I think when we can, we're going direct offshore in Asia and custom making it from scratch and whether that's cut and sew or whether that's a product, we've just got a lot more opportunity to get creative and unique, which is really the fun part about it.
Yeah, so it's like getting away from the commodity, that everybody has access to the same damn products, which, it results in a sort of a price war. So, I mean, it just, as I look at Anthem, it's like exceptional custom created products and then exceptional design layered on that. And then you just end up, that's the formula, right? You end up with an amazing end result.
Yeah. And it's, it's certainly been really good for us. It's very challenging. There are those times where it's, we laugh where some clients come to us and ask for like the impossible. And we're like, hey, sometimes it's nice to just throw us a bone. You need 1,000 mugs. Great. That's easy. Yeah. But yeah, it's certainly more rewarding when we can get creative with the packaging and the product. And it doesn't mean it has to be over designed. It could be those thoughtful touches and that sort of understated, sort of elegance, and looking to retail and what's what's on trend is certainly something that our team does a pretty good job at doing as well.
Nice. Well, this is the point of the podcast where we're going to play crystal ball here, break out a little provision. So let's look 20 years into the future in our industry. What significant change do you foresee? Like, what do you predict?
Oh man, with Moore's law, that's pretty challenging. 20 years seems like, I feel like we've just lived, just lived a decade in the last 2 months, but, seriously. I think technology will change everything, right? So, and continue to. So I think from, that if Amazon is in this game, in the promo game, that's going to be super challenging for those sort of commodity type, transacting, more transactionally based, product distributors and even apparel decorators. I think all the direct to garment stuff that just gets better and better quality is going to make it pretty challenging as well. And then the 3D printing and 3D knitting is going to be really interesting. When you have these, we're kind of in the beginning phases of the 3D knitting machines that can do the whole knit garments to spec. That's going to be pretty interesting when people can sort of mass customization where they could scan their body and get a fitted hoodie that's knitted with no waste and then printed out of a machine. That's going to be pretty compelling. So I think you're going to still see a ton of, maybe it gets more commoditized and, huge, these big print farms that can do all these things online and it's just one touch button. I think that's going to be, the technology interplay is going to be really interesting. I think I'm really fascinated to see what happens in the screen print world with direct to garment versus the traditional, water-based screen printing is always preferred. I know, they're making some strides in technology and screen printing, but it's a pretty old school process and that'll be interesting to see how that continues to evolve in your world. And then a lot of the sort of how augmented reality plays into these products and how technology gets woven into like biofabrication and how technology gets woven into fibers to give you feedback on whether you're engaged with a company or just, health related types of things is going to be super interesting.
So at the end of the day, it's just major advancements in technology will drive all things.
Yeah, I think that's going to be a big piece of it. And then obviously there's always going to be a design element and there's always going to be a personalization and people are going to want to be different than the commodity. They don't want to look like everybody else, but this technology mixed with customizing specific to each person and being able to do that, have people be able to personalize things really easily is going to be pretty compelling.
Yeah, good point. All right, let's move to rapid fire questions. I have 3. I want to be respectful of your time here.
Yeah, sure.
What's the one book that should be required reading for anybody in our space?
There's so many books. I think I'll just name a few that have been pretty key. There's, from a client perspective, there's The Art of Client Service is a really good book. It's more of an agency sort of approach, but I think it's super thoughtful on how to engage with a client. Crucial Conversations is a book that I recommend to anybody, how to have a hard conversation sort of when the stakes are high. I think communication in business and personally is key to pretty much everything. So that should be required reading. That's one I think you could read a couple times a year and always get something out of it. I really like I'm a big book reader. I mean, I always find a topic of, that's the beauty of technology now too. Like a Blinkist is a great app where you can get the cliff notes of any book in 15 minutes and you can listen to it or you can read it. But I try to find any topic that is of interest for me, of something I'm trying to think a little deeper on. It's easy to find a good podcast or book to get some really articulate insight on. But I really like the book, The One Thing and the Compounding Effect. And that compounding effect is just sort of all those little things add up to big results. And Essentialism is an awesome book too, about sort of the disciplined pursuit of less, really focusing on like, what's the key thing you're trying to do. Those are just really great books. And then, I have, I just read, I don't know, last year, Never Split the Difference, by Chris Voss, who's a former FBI negotiator. He's got a great book on just negotiating, and there's a lot of psychology in there, and that's pretty interesting. And, anything on teams and culture, I think is really good. So tons of, I've got a whole book list I've got a website that I'm always putting books that I read on, that you could check out, tedchurch.com, that kind of features some podcasts I'm really into and books that I'm constantly reading. So, but those are some good ones to start with for sure.
Awesome. We'll be sure to link your website and those book titles.
Yeah.
That's great. Is there any other place you go for inspiration, like websites or? You go to? I mean, what's the sort of de facto?
Yeah, I think obviously I'm following trends in retail and brands that I like. I'm a big business of fashion person, and there's a site called WGSN which features. It's very forward in the fashion front, so you can kind of get a sense of what's going to be popular 2 years from now. And then I look at obviously Instagram and all the social channels, Pinterest, to see what's happening with brands that I admire, from brands, if you're a standard Patagonia, to what is Kith doing, what's Off-White doing, to kind of get a sense of the spectrum of fashion and who's kind of pushing the boundaries, whether it's maybe more streetwear and how that's going to then translate into more mainstream. And again, for us, it really depends on what the client's doing. If it's a Midwestern insurance brand, they're, Off-White is not appropriate, but maybe they lean towards, what Patagonia is doing or something like that. But, or if it's a more forward thinking lifestyle brand, they might be into what's going on at Kith and Off-White. That's for something that's leaning a little more forward. Got it.
And that leads me up to my final question. I think that was a great segue, talking about aligning, with customers and their brand, their identity. Give us a sense, kind of walk us through and describe your all-time favorite standout client project.
I have a couple that
asking you to choose your favorite.
Yeah. I love them all equally, clearly. There's a few that I think that are just really cool and fun to talk about. The first one being, we did a collaboration between Wiz Khalifa and Converse for an influencer kit. And what was cool about that is the ask was that Converse was making a shoe for Wiz Khalifa as a collaboration, and they wanted to make a big splash and introduction about it. And so they came to us and said, hey, we need to make an influencer kit that we're going to send these shoes out to the top 100 tastemakers in hip hop. And what are we going to do to make that cool? And so we came up with this concept of creating an actual DJ case, heavy duty, it was 30 pounds, all die cut out, laser cut. So it held, you as the influencer received a pair of shoes, Wiz's new album, a signed poster, an actual an iPod with the music. And there was one other, like a Bluetooth speaker, all customized with personal information, letter, and then how to share it on social channels. And then we shipped that out to the top 100 tastemakers in hip hop, and they got a huge buzz about it and blew up social. And that was just a really fun project because we pulled it off in 3 weeks, completely customized, super authentic for that audience. And that was killer. And a fun one to talk about. Absolutely. And then I would say the other ones that we like things, Google is a good example, just working with them of, they're super playful with their color palette and just doing custom things for them, whether it's custom hoodies or we did custom nylon hammocks and sleeping bags and backpacks and that are all just completely on brand and over the top for Google, kind of in that Cotopaxi vibe. But on point for Google, and they just got a ton of goodwill. Like everybody received it, just raves about it, and we get a ton of a lot of people come through the site and always comment on our Google hoodie because it's cut and sewn with a mountain shape. Sorry about this blowing up, and it's just great. And so that's been a really fun one, and then. Anything, we're really proud of a recent project we did for Natural Habitat Adventures, which is a travel company that sends travelers all over the world into these really beautiful natural environments. And one of the projects we did recently for them was for their polar bear expeditions up in the Arctic Circle. We created a custom parka that could withstand 30 below temperatures, waterproof. All the pockets were customized, and we built it offshore with like really technical fabric and sustainable down, and it was completely on brand. And that was a really fun project to work with them and their team to really look at like, okay, where do people put their gloves in the inside pockets, and how do we eliminate pockets so people aren't stuffing, unnecessary things when they're out in the Arctic Circle. And then we made a set of travel bags for them that matched their brand and had all the interior taping, and all the liners were all decorated with their logos. And it had to be very specific to fit the travel requirements and the weights, and it had to be durable enough to withstand, going to the Arctic Circle or to the Sahara Desert. And so those are really fun projects for us, where we can get kind of technical with the design, but also, match the brand. And then we also love like all of brewery stuff. Business we do is really fun because each brewery's got such a unique story and such a unique vibe to the brand that translating that onto product in a unique way is really, really fun exercise for us, rather than just, same hat, different logo. Those are always awesome projects. So we're constantly featuring projects on our social channels. You can find it at Anthem Branding, and highlighting those case studies on our site. So.
And I'm going to encourage all of our listeners to, subscribe and follow you guys everywhere, because the content you generate, the stories you tell, your product photography. I mean, there's so much to learn. Even some of the placement decisions you guys make is just insane. Like I never would have thought of some of these things. So there's so much to learn from you folks. So do me a favor, call out where our listeners can follow and learn more about Anthem Branding.
So on all social, we're just at Anthem Branding. Follow us LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, Pinterest. And then obviously follow along at anthembranding.com. You can look at our blog, subscribe to our site, and we're constantly sharing projects that we're working on there. So that's a great place to see everything. And then for me personally, I'm at Ted Church on all the channels.
Awesome. Well, we'll make sure to link this in the show notes and get that distributed, because again, what you guys are doing is absolutely fantastic, and there's so much to learn from it. So with that, Ted, I certainly appreciate your time, and I'm grateful that you were able to share and give some insights with your business and your experience. And again, there's so much to learn from what you guys do. So Thanks for the time and for connecting with me. I appreciate it.
Hey, JP, I appreciate it. Thanks for the time, everyone, and enjoy. Good luck.